And President Trump says there's tremendous progress to end the war in Ukraine. He says he'll only meet with the Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy when the deal is final. Joining me now to discuss these latest developments is retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Robert Maginnis. Colonel, thanks so much for joining. President Trump could meet with Zelenskyy as soon as Thanksgiving to finalize this peace deal. Why now? And has either Russia or Ukraine changed their conditions? How optimistic are you where things stand?
Well, Steve, they've narrowed from 28 to 19 points, and apparently, based on recent reporting here on your channel, they have reached, certainly from the Ukrainian perspective, where they feel comfortable. Now, there are three issues, I would argue, that must be settled, and apparently Ukraine agrees. One is that security guarantees must be real. That's why Zelenskyy is calling for people to demonstrate pragmatically what they're going to do to ensure that peace. Russia has to come under some sort of pressure and be, the people that they respect out of the Middle East and China must weigh in. And of course, President Trump spoke earlier today with President Xi of China, inviting one another back and forth. In April, Trump goes to Beijing. But there are key issues that the Chinese control with regard to Russia and the Ukraine. And of course, I think they're mostly about economics. And the third issue is that the U.S. strategic strategy that Mark Rubio settled in Geneva apparently weigh the military strength as well as the global coalition building that is necessary to make this happen. And so it would appear as if the pieces are coming together. But keep in mind, global diplomatic chess playing is very difficult with all these players. And with Secretary Driscoll over in Abu Dhabi, trying to talk the Russians into accepting it, it perhaps at this point it would be favorable, but given Vladimir Putin's background and his effort to delay this, to leverage for more, that may be a sticking point. So we'll have to wait and see.
Now, one of the main points of contention that's still unresolved is the issue of territorial concessions, particularly what I'm seeing in the Donbass region, a very important area for rare earths and all kinds of other natural resources. What do you think is the most likely outcome in terms of where the lines are ultimately drawn in terms of what Russia now occupies?
Now, likely there'll be some sort of compromise with regard to the sovereignty of the area from Kharkiv all the way down to the Crimea. Those are, of course, mostly occupied by Russians, heavily fought. Hundreds of thousands of people have died over that line of contention. I would imagine because the Russians have already, based on their parliamentary decisions, made those part of the Russian Republic, that in all probability, that's something that Putin's not going to back down from. Remember, in the beginning, Putin wanted the restoration of the old Russian Empire. And of course, that would include all of Ukraine, but he may have to settle at this point, subject to the constraints that have been imposed on him, for something less. But he's not going to walk away empty-handed. And so I think that that's going to be part of the difficulty. Zelenskyy may be aboard, and he may be willing to come to Washington to talk to Trump, but Putin is a different factor. He wants really to drag out the negotiations to get more and get as much as he can until it hurts too much, and then perhaps he'll compromise and accept the deal.
How problematic of a precedent is it if Russia does ultimately achieve those gains territorially, and in their mind, to your point, is just going to be this sort of squeeze to the point of seeing how much we get? And how quickly do you think Putin's going to, withdraw the troops.
Yeah, well, after 25 years of being in power, Putin, of course, is surrounded by lackeys and sycophants that are going to do what he wants, and that is to, promote, as I indicated, the grandiose, the former idea of the greatness of Russia. He doesn't want to see his troops pull back too much, just because they've claimed those, eastern provinces as sovereign territory, and that would be kind of going back on what his promise was to the Russian people, plus the fact that he's probably lost 1 million casualties, wounded and killed, and at great expense to the entire nation. So there are a host of issues here. Putin is a tough character. I can remember back in the Cold War when I was in Eastern Europe, they rule with an iron fist, and I think that continues even this day. So he'll be a hard customer. In spite of the smiles you saw in Anchorage when he met with Trump in August, he's going to be hard to convince that this is a deal that he must accept.
Now, on the Ukrainian side, Zelenskyy is asking European leaders to organize a force to send into Ukraine. Ukraine's desire to join NATO was one of the precipitating factors, at least on the surface, perhaps an excuse of Russia's invasion. Do you see security guarantees having a place in a final agreement?
Well, Zelensky's insisting upon it. If he gets no tangible security guarantees, he's unlikely to bow to the other, things that he has to accept. Keep in mind, Vladimir Putin, as far back as the Munich Security Conference, I think, about a decade and a half ago, made it very clear to the world that he'll never accept Ukraine being a member of NATO. And so that's a non-starter. I think that security guarantees are a different proposition, and certainly supplies of armaments and so forth to Ukraine. The big issue, I think, also is the size of the armed forces of Ukraine. That's something Putin wants to see diminished. And of course, unless there are tangible security guarantees, Zelenskyy and the Ukrainians are never going to accept the deal. So I think they're in that 19-point plan. All of these are addressed in one way or another. And so it's a matter of really getting through all the very significant details through there to satisfy both parties. And that's a tall order.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert Maginnis, thanks so much for joining.